the beacon for the nation.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Live Real Talk, and my name is Feisal Kassim. And this evening we are talking about matters education, and in our company is the lovely CAS of Education, Miss Mumina, Honorable Miss Mumina Bonai. Thanks so much, Mheshimiwa, for making time for us this evening.
Thank you.
Before we go into matters education and delve into that topic of discussion, let's see this insert that was prepared by one Suleiman Nechesa of Tumbo from Horizon TV.
It has been 6 months since the government abruptly closed schools and colleges nationwide in response to COVID-19, disrupting nearly 17 million learners countrywide. Since then, the Ministry of Education and other agencies announced that learners should undertake online learning or technology-mediated learning on TV, radio and mobile phones until when it will be safe to reopen. While such learning has been taking place in some of the urban schools, for many marginalized children in remote villages, including refugee children in camps, as well as those living with various disabilities, learning during COVID-19 schools closure has been a challenge. The mystery of schools reopening anytime soon started when the Cabinet Secretary Professor George Magoha announced that the 2020 calendar will be considered lost due to COVID-19 restrictions. This statement sent a wave of shock to many parents and pupils, killing any hope to reopen schools anytime sooner. This followed a directive by Professor Magoha for school administrations to refund or give credit notes to parents who had paid the 2020 academic year school fees in advance. Professor Magoha found himself in the midst of criticism from parents and school owners who were constantly accusing him of closing schools without giving a clear-cut school's reopening schedule. Although the CS has maintained that decision to reopen schools remain a temporary decision. In a twist of events, speaking on September 21st, after a stakeholders meeting at the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development to review the reopening plan, Education Cabinet Secretary Professor George Magoha said it was time for children to resume school without giving the exact reopening date.
Decisions regarding the reopening of learning institutions may change as informed by reports obtained from the Ministry of Health, hereby represented by Dr. Mbajo, prevailing circumstances, and increased knowledge of COVID. At that time, we were spiking into between 4 to 6 to 700. I think the expert has told you what is happening, and therefore it is in good state for us this morning to have come to relook at this process.
While the government gears up to reopen schools and colleges after 6 months closure, the sorry state of some institutions puts the question to the level of preparedness. The Teachers Service Commission on Monday indicated that teachers are expected back in school by September 28 to prepare for reopening of schools. The question of whether parents are ready to release their children to schools before the curve totally flattens remains unanswered. Nechesa Suleiman, Horizon TV.
Thanks so much, Suleiman Nechesa, for that report. And of course, there is a lot of mixed reaction from the citizens of this country, that is after the announcements from the Education CS on resumptions of schools right here in Kenya. And that is what we want to talk about. Ms. Mumina Bonayo, thank you so much for making time for us this evening. The schools were closed due to this corona pandemic, which currently the global figures stand at 32,420,147. Kenya's contribution to that being 37,489 out of 506,632 tested. Ms. Mumina Bonaya, the numbers are still on an ascending trajectory. Talk of Kenya, talk of globally. And we are going back to school. Is that the wisest decision at this moment, Mheshimiwa?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Feisal, for having me here. It's a pleasure for me, and I think it's good to have a conversation around return to school and make it a honest one. Early this year, in March, like you've said, we closed schools because we looked at three things. Number one was safety of our children. The second one was the quality of education that we needed to maintain. And the third one was actually the issue of equity. So based on those three considerations, a decision was reached to close down schools so that our kids can be safe at home with their parents. And it's now 6 months, going to the 7th month since we've closed school. And our decision to stay closed was actually informed by the fact that the infections were going up at some point. But if you look at the rate of infection, the positivity rate, for the last 2-3 weeks, we've been at 4-5%. So that clearly indicates that the rate has gone down considerably. And when we closed, we had a caveat saying that in the event that the infection goes down, then we will revisit our decision to see whether we can reopen. And that is where we are at this point. We are having that conversation. Mm-hmm. And here we should be clear that we are just preparing ourselves for a possible or eventual reopening. It's not yet decided. There are other stakeholders who need to be engaged.
Okay.
There are national level stakeholders who are yet to look at what we've proposed in terms of decision to reopen and how we will go about it. Okay. We have our president who is yet to announce the position. But for us as ministry and TSC, it's our responsibility to be ready in the event that we make a decision as a country to go back to school.
So if I understand you correctly, it is not yet decided, rubber stamped, that schools are going to be reopened next month, is it?
We are waiting to hear that.
We are waiting. So it's not yet confirmed?
Yeah, it's just that media decided we are reopening. We said we are preparing ourselves for possible or eventual reopening.
Then how do you define the order for teachers to go back to school by Monday?
If we decide to reopen,
okay,
the schools must be made friendly for children to return. So that is the responsibility of teachers and the administration. Mm-hmm. So we can't announce reopening and teachers are not in schools.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Please kindly take us through your proposal. What are some of the measures that you have proposed to be put in place for schools reopening? Before we go into that, when do you propose, as per your proposals, you said before you engage more stakeholders, when do you propose these schools should be reopened as a ministry?
Feisal, I would like you to spare me that announcement because it's not my responsibility to say we are reopening on this date. I've told you our work is largely to get ready in the event that we are asked to reopen schools.
Yes.
But one thing that I can mention to you is that in case we are advised to reopen, mm-hmm. then we want to salvage the year that was about to be lost.
That was about to be lost?
Yeah.
So in that case, if I read in between the lines, if you allow me to read in between the lines, then there are likelihood of schools to be reopened before the year ends, correct?
Sure.
Thank you. So any specific month maybe that you likely would love the schools to be reopened?
I can't actually say or confirm the month because we've given options.
Okay.
We've given options. So it is the, and these options we've given is going to a larger group for consultations once again. And from there it goes to the head of state.
Okay.
So we are waiting to hear from the authority.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe a question. You might have an idea, of course. You're allowed to pass this question. Do you think the president will touch on matters of education in his next address of the nation? From the way things are looking, from your proposals and from the speed that things are moving, do you think he's going to touch on matters of education?
This is my personal opinion.
Sure.
I think education forms the larger part of the economy that we need to reopen.
Okay.
If we make a decision to open up the country.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of economy that happens around schools. Mm-hmm. So school or schools or learning institutions cannot be bypassed if we decide as a country to resume the new normal. Okay. I wouldn't say normal, but the new normal.
Okay, thanks so much.
So for me, it's most likely to.
It's most likely to.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks so much for that amazing answer. Now, a number of schools, a number of countries tried reopened their schools within this pandemic period. Talk of South Africa, talk of Japan, talk of France, and the list is endless. But these same countries went back into closing their schools after the number of coronavirus increased in their respective schools and countries at large when the schools were reopened. What different are you planning to do, or have you proposed to make, besides what different maybe are you planning to do from this country to ensure the safety of the children and the nation at large?
First of all, I think it's good to appreciate the fact that we can't keep our schools closed perpetually.
Yeah.
At one point, we will have to make a decision, and it has to be a bold decision to reopen. If you look at the situation currently, yes, we've closed schools to keep our children at home, but how many of them are at home? I mean, we have a situation where a child is neither in school nor at home. So for how long are we going to continue like this? And I think our decision, our conversation around reopening is informed by the fact that as a country, our positivity rate is going down. So before we mention other countries around us, how is the infection going within the country? So that's the first thing we are looking at. Of course, we will draw lessons from what other countries faced when they reopen their schools. And what we are doing as a country is that we are domesticating the health guidelines that is in place to fit the school environment. What is it that can be done in the event of reopening to avoid infections within the school environment? And that is what we've asked teachers to come back and work on as they wait for us to reopen schools. I'm sure most people are wondering, where are teachers in schools? They are trying to look at, those guidelines. What is it that they can do within their schools in terms of setting up, hand wash points? How can they space the classes out? The classes may not be enough, yes, but what other facilities in schools can you use for learning? There could be a church in school where you can actually convert to a classroom and all that. And those are issues that needs to be contextualized, looking at each individual school. And that's exactly what teachers are doing. And many other health protocols that are required to be followed at this point in time. And we are not saying 100% that we will not get any infection in schools. There might be a spike.
Yeah.
But of course it will be isolated. It can't be, everywhere. So then how are we preparing ourselves to handle that? We are working with county governments. We are telling them, can we have a dispensary close to schools everywhere we have our schools operational? So those are some of the finer details that we are working on. And of course, for many people, they may not have an understanding of that. But as a ministry and as a TSC, those are the details that is happening currently.
Interesting. Thanks so much, Mheshimiwa, for that. Now, hypothetically speaking, assuming we agree, or the president agrees, or the stakeholders agree that the schools are going to be open, and I'm sure one of the things that the teachers are going to put in place in this case is the physical distancing, correct? Looking at a school, for example, some primary schools, let's take Olympic Primary School, for example, with a school of at least 1,200 students. That's the population of a primary school. So that means a class maybe can get up to 60, 70 students, right? People coming from the informal settlements. In this case, what practically can be done?
I think, first of all, we need to get ourselves into that practical scenario to see how things will work. As a government, there are a number of things that are going on. I know you are aware of the desk project that we are currently undertaking. The 1.9 billion worth desk that will go to, some of these schools like Olympic, where there's a bit of congestion. And I want to say this, people should not expect that we will get 100% physical distance in our schools. That may not be possible at this point in time. Remember, as a country, we went for 100% transition of our children.
Yes.
And that is why we have everybody in class. And for us, what is important is how are we working best? How are we getting innovatively around this challenge? What is it that we can do to solve some of these problems? And that is why we have teachers at the level of schools looking at it practically. And I think it's important we give them a chance to do it. We give them support that they require. As parents, we are also stakeholders. What is it that we can come into to input in that process? It's not enough just to sit back and criticize everything, every decision.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Again, allow me to ask you, please, if you don't mind, just there are stories, it's not yet confirmed, it's not yet rubber stamped about the phases reopening of the schools. And I would like to ask you about that. These are just stories flying around, as you've said, right? Some of these stories are just flying around. So I just want you to kindly, if it's true, then you authenticate it right here, about the partial and phases reopening of the schools in such a way that it's supposedly proposed that in October, the candidates will be the first ones to resume schools so that they sit for their examinations by next year in April. Is that correct?
Like I mentioned earlier, we've given options.
Yeah.
I'll be lying if I sit here and say this is the option that we are going for. It could be option 1, 2, or 3 that will be picked on.
Okay.
So I can't actually authoritatively sit here and say we are doing this kind of phase reopening. So it will be good if we wait for that moment to hear from the president about how we intend to reopen. Yeah. Thank you.
Interesting. Who was the final shot on the matter? Is it the president? Is it the stakeholders? Is it the Ministry of Education?
The president gave this process to the stakeholders. Of course, the stakeholders have had a robust conversation around it. Looking at what is practically possible, what is it that we are able to achieve within our schools, how can we go about it, how can we salvage the year that we thought would have lost it, and what is the way when it comes to reopening? Should we face it out? Should we not face it out? We've had very good conversation with all stakeholders around this at ministry level. We are now taking the proposal to the nationwide stakeholder forum that is happening on Monday, I believe, this coming Monday. And after that, the president will be able to tell us, because we will have presented, a recommendation that can actually guide him in terms of, making a decision.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, Mheshimiwa Mumina Bonaya, right here, the CAS of the Ministry of Education, our beloved viewers, and that's why we're going on a very short break. But please do not touch that dial, because we are coming back with more. Stay put.
Horizon TV, the beacon for the nation.
La kutafakari.
Hatupendani. Mahaba yetu yako katika nini? Leo ukimwona mtu yompenda mwenzake sana, wallahi kabila moja. Ukiona wapendana sana, watoka kijiji kimoja. Ukiona wapendana sana, basi wanapenda vitu moja moja. Yani kuna vitu wameshirikiana katika mapenzi ya hivyo vitu. Leo angalia hata katika harusi, angalia katika janaza, pafe mtu hapa leo, akifa Mdigo wa Digo ni wengi, akifa Msomali wa Somali ndio wengi, Akifa Mchonyi, Wachonyi ndo wengi. Akifa mtu wa Lamu ndo atakuwa watu wengi hapa. Akifa mtu wa bara, subhana rabbil izza, sijui atazikwa na nani. Muhammad Karioki aje afe hapa, atazikwa na nani katika sisi? Hatumjui, tutasema hivi. Mpelekeni Sakina mjini. Manake Sakina ndio pelekwa watu wasokuwa na watu wao. Vipi Muislamu atolewe mtu hapo pelekwe Sakina kwa sababu hana mtu? Ni mfano tu nauliza, sijui kama mafanyia hivyo watu hapo. Lakini sidhani akafa Onyango Omari kama atapata janaza kama vile akifa mmoja wetu sisi makabila yaliokuwa mengi mtu hapa, tutahisi kama kumkufa mtu. Naulizeni ndugu Waislamu, mimbar kazi yake ni kusema kweli. Ni wadigo ngapi watakuja kumzika Onyango alokufa hapa ambaye ni Muhammad Onyango ama Omar Karioki? Ni wabajuni wangapi watakuja kumzika Omar Karioki hapa? Ni Wasomali wangapi watakuja kumzika? Ni Waswahili wangapi watakuja kumzika mtu ambaye si Mswahili mwenzao? Ni wanabiashara wangapi watakuja kumzika mtu ambaye kwamba maskini hoye hahe ana kibanda tu pale? Ni matajiri wangapi watakuja kumzika na wanabiashara? Paka afe tajiri mwenzao ndio msikiti utajaa matajiri, magari makubwa yatakuwa hapa, hata parking haitatosha. Watu watatoka mjini, wengine watoke na Kilifi, wanakuja kumzika jidosi mwenzao. Kamba ule udosi utatusaidia kesho mbele ya Mwenyezi Mungu ama hapo kaburini. Tukosa kufahamu mambo muhimu. Alokufa Muislamu haijalishi wamjua ama humjui.
La kutafakari.
قال تعالى في محكم تنزيله بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم.
Ninasaha kutoka pwani.
هذا الدين قال الله قال الرسول قال الصحابة هم أولو العرفان. انتهى.
Ili kuongoza kwenye njia iliyonyoka.
Sikizeni hadithi hii ya Mtume alayhi salatu wasalam.
Hakuna atakayeweza kumfungia mtu mlango ambaye Mwenyezi Mungu alimfungulia.
Kuimarisha imani yako.
Thabbit qulubana ala dinik wa ala ta'atik.
Ungana na mashekhi wetu kutoka pwani kwenye mimbar.
Mimbar zinamwakilisha Mtume sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Ni Jumamosi na wakati saa 3 usiku katika Horizon TV, runinga uipendayo.
Kuanzia Jumatatu hadi Ijumaa kila saa 2 hadi saa 3 asubuhi na saa 10 hadi 10:30 jioni, Horizon TV ikishirikiana na taasisi ya maendeleo ya mtaala yani KICD itakuletea vipindi vya masomo ya msingi na ya sekondari. Usikose kuungana nasi kila siku ya wiki saa 2 hadi saa 3 asubuhi na saa 10 hadi 10:30 jioni.
La kutafakari.
Mimi na walenga Waislamu ambao waliozaliwa katika Uislamu, nawaambieni mcheni Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nawaambieni musiwe sababu ya mtu kuchukia Uislamu. Ikiwa wewe hutaki kufanya da'wa, ikiwa wewe hutaki kutoa wakati wako au mali yako au juhudi yako, ikiwa wewe waona si jukumu lako kufanya da'wa na hufanyi bidii yoyote, ukaamua kukaa hivyo hivyo, basi na kuomba usiwe sababu ya kuchukia Uislamu, mtu kuchukia Uislamu. Wewe hufanye sababu ya mtu kupenda Uislamu, the least you can do, basi usichangie mtu kuchukia Uislamu kwa sababu ya matamshi yako, kwa sababu ya vitendo vako. Kwa nini? Kwa sababu wewe huenda ukawa sababu mtu hapendi Uislamu. Kwa hivyo unakukanya ndugu yangu Muislamu, na nakutahadharisha ya kwamba usije ukashikwa siku ya kiyama na wewe hata huna habari. Mtu asiyekuwa Muislamu umemzungumzisha vibaya, umemtanisha vibaya, ukafanya yule mtu akaona Waislamu ndio wako hivi. Na hapa pia nataka kutoa tambii, mjue ya kwamba Mtihani uliotupata sisi Waislamu ni kwamba tunapofanya kosa lile halionekani ni la jamii fulani ama ni la mtu fulani. Kosa lile huonekana ndo Waislamu walivyo. Hiyo ndo kazi ya shetani kabla mtu mwingine. Shetani hamu yake ni watu wasione njia imani na nuru ya Uislamu. Kwa hivyo jambo lolote utakalolifanya, shetani atamfanya huyu wa leo ambaye ulimfanyia maovu, atamfanya afahamu kwamba hivi ndio Waislamu walivyo. Na natoa ushahidi wa Qur'an hata katika matamshi. Mwenyezi Mungu Subhanahu wa Ta'ala asema, wa qul li'ibadi yaqulu allati hiya ahsan inna ash-shaytana yanzaghu bainahum. Mwenyezi Mungu Subhanahu wa Ta'ala asema, ewe Muhammad mtume wangu, waambie waja wangu wanaponena, wanaposema, wanapozungumza, wazungumze yanayokuwa mazuri. Kwa nini? Kwa sababu ikiwa hawatazungumza maneno mazuri, wakisema maneno ambayo hayamridhishi Mwenyezi Mungu ama maneno yakafahamika vibaya, basi ujue kwamba inna shaitan, kwa hakika shetani yanza baina, huchukua lile neno akalipika akalirusha katika ufahamu yule mtu aliyezungumzishwa, mpaka yule akafahamu kumbe alikusudia hivi, ili hali wewe hukusudia, ulitamka tu. Kwa hivyo wasia wangu kwa ummatu Muhammad kwa jumla, ikiwa hutakuwa sababu ya mtu kupenda Uislamu, basi usikuwe sababu ya mtu kuchukia Uislamu.
La kutafakari.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much for keeping it live. Real Talk right here on Friday. We are talking about matters education, and as she said, that education should or is likely to be addressed. Why? Because it has a huge economy evolving around it, and Kenyans are yearning for the economy to be reopened because they're choosing livelihoods over lives. I mean, of course, we can always work around something. Thanks so much, Mheshimiwa, for making time for us again this evening. Mheshimiwa, as the schools were closed, some institutions, mostly private institutions, went ahead and conducted online classes, right? And as the schools are going to be reopened, we are expecting students to go back to class. And I don't know what's in the proposal in terms of, is it you're going to cover for the lost time, or you are going to start the whole year afresh? But irrespective of the case, Mheshimiwa, are they going to sit for the same exam? Talk of the whole students nationally sitting for the same exams?
Thank you. Let me start by saying the policy decisions that we make it for Kenyan children.
Okay.
For us, there's no private child or public school-going child.
Mm-hmm.
A Kenyan child is a Kenyan child. And like I mentioned earlier, one of the considerations that we looked at when we closed schools in March was equity.
Okay.
And for us, equity, and then there was also quality. You are talking of online learning that happened.
Yeah.
That was a choice that was made by parents. Probably they wanted to engage their children. That was the best way to engage them. But remember, there's a quality check on how curriculum is normally covered. There's a need for learner and the teacher to interact. The physical interaction needs to be there. So the online learning lacks that. So can someone just assume that we've covered the syllabus? No. For me, that is not the case.
Okay.
So like we mentioned before, we will pick it up from where we left.
But the interaction,
and that applies to everybody.
The interaction, the lack of interaction between the teacher and the student doesn't necessarily stop the information from being disseminated, correct?
I'm simply saying for effective learning to take place, there must
Perfect.
be interaction between the learner
Yes.
and the teacher.
Okay, that's fine. But again, now what I'm trying to say here is that some students are going to be privileged in this case more than other students. While others were playing, while others were not at home and not at school, others were simply at home studying or at their respective tuition centers studying. and attending the online classes. So they are likely to be more privileged than the rest.
I would like to correct that notion where we always assume that for those who are not online learning, they are not learning at all. There's a lot of learning that happens in homes, in the field where they are doing herding, where they are cooking in the kitchen. There's so much learning, so much, even in terms of richness,
yes,
that you can't compare with the online learning that we are trying to make it look like it's the best learning that can happen.
Can you change terminology
now? For us,
okay,
for the time they were at home,
yes,
every child was learning, whether he was privileged to learn online, whether the child was privileged to learn on the farm,
yes,
farming,
yes,
whether the child was privileged to follow the herd in the wilderness. There was some skills that were going on that were being learned.
Perfect.
So that's the most important thing.
Fair enough. That's understood. Now, can you change terminologies now and use schooling instead of learning? So some people were schooling online while others were learning in different other spaces. Now, will these people who are schooling online be privileged when they're sitting for that national examination?
Nobody was in school, so we can't talk of schooling. Everybody was at home and they were learning in that home space.
Interesting, Mheshimiwa, but again, they're still getting that information, correct?
Yeah.
I mean, you cannot deny that fact that they are getting that information.
I mean, as a country, I don't know why we are assuming it's only kids who are online who are learning. I mean, there's a lot more learning that is happening outside.
That's understood.
Yeah.
But what you're trying to say is that these people are getting that information that they would have gotten if they were in class, and they are getting it from the comfort of their home.
Yeah.
At the same time, some students, fellow students who are in other schools, maybe the same level, are not privileged enough to get that same information. And then at the end of the schooling period, at the end of the school calendar, they are going to sit for the same national examination. Don't you think one will be privileged more than the other?
Let me give you an example, a practical
Please.
example, because I'm a parent.
Yes.
I had my daughter doing online learning. So one of the practical lessons that they were asked to engage in was to cook. So they were given ingredients of what they're required to prepare, and the teacher was online to show them how to do it.
Yes.
She's in Nairobi. She has that privilege of going online to learn that. But let's compare her with a child who is in the village, who in reality every other day wakes up to prepare breakfast or dinner or a meal for the family. They are both learning. So what's the difference? In fact, the one in the village does it so well. My daughter was struggling to do it.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough, Mheshimiwa.
Yeah.
Fair enough. We'll leave it at that. Talk of 100% transition that the government of Kenya is really yearning to achieve, and of course they have achieved to some certain extent. We saw the CS Magoha moving around, getting the students out of the villages and from homes to enroll them in schools. With this pandemic came another pandemic of teenage pregnancies, which apparently it has been in existence all along. Now, do you think it's still going to be possible to achieve the 100% transition with the rate of teenage pregnancies over this 6 months that the children have been at home?
Yeah, it's. I mean, let me begin by saying it's going to be a challenge. Remember, these are, children who have been pushed to a responsibility that is bigger than them. Becoming a mother at that young age.
Yeah.
And we are fully aware that it's not going to be an easy task pushing them back to class. But we need everybody on board. We need the parents, we need the teachers, we need the counselors, the community leaders, everybody to be with us to be able to get back these learners to school. And for us, we already have the data of all these children. When they reported early this year, we captured their details. So teachers know, that school administration know, the community leaders are aware that we are going back to trace them wherever they are and ensure that they are back in school. That is the plan we are working on as a ministry. So the same campaign that happened early this year for 100% transition will happen once again once the schools are open.
Thank you so much, Mheshimiwa. But that's a one-off. Now, moving forward, what are the structural solutions that are going to be put in place to ensure such won't occur again? Because as it is, a number of organizations came out saying that this teenage pregnancy, supposedly that's on spike during this pandemic, has always been there, not just been covered, right? It has always been there. We've seen counties like Kilifi leading in teenage pregnancies, huge numbers. Western counties like Bungoma and the likes having high number of teenage pregnancies. What is the plan to try and curb this pandemic?
I agree with you. The teenage pregnancy has always been an issue. But remember, the school has always been a safe space for children. And for the period that they've been at home, most of them have experienced, some sort of social ills in one way or another. And it happened that early pregnancy is one of those social ills that happen to our learners while they're at home. And this is something that is happening within the community. I think, first of all, we need to question ourselves. As a parent, how are we parenting? And as a community, how are we guarding our children against these social ills? Why should we have such practice where, men are going after young girls? Why? These are children. Their rights need to be respected. And for those who enforce laws, what is it that we are not doing right? Because if the laws are enforced, then this shouldn't be happening to our children. So from where we sit, including yourself as someone from media, what is it that we are doing? What role are we playing to ensure that this doesn't happen, or actually it stops? Because a child needs to be a child. We don't need to make a child, double up the role that that is bigger than her. For example, being a learner and at the same time being a mother. That is too much for certain age. So we all have got a role to play. Me and you have got something to say about this. We should always work tirelessly to discourage, a situation where old men or grown-up men go after young girls and spoil their lives.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much. Fair enough. Mheshimiwa, finally, rather the second last question as we are wrapping up this conversation this evening. Varsities and TVETs, any proposals for their phase reopening?
If we are reopening basic, then I think it's obvious that we should also consider reopening universities and TVET. Mm-hmm. And like I mentioned to you, that will also be pronounced by the authority, by the president at the right time.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Fair enough.
And I think you need to know that most TVETs and universities are partially open. They're already doing exams. Some are doing inductions online. A few things here and there, like where they are required to be doing practicals, the arrangement has been made for them to come and participate.
Thank you. Thank you. That's fair enough. Mheshimiwa, how does the common Mwananchi get to contribute to these proposals that you say is going out nationally for a wider consultation? If someone wants to contribute, sends his or her contributions to the proposals.
First of all, if you can recall, before we closed school, remember there was a round of consultation that happened. And the process was opened up to the public, where they were asked to submit proposals in terms of whether we should, close or not. And within that, there were scenarios that were given. So the second time, then we revisited the matter in terms of whether we should reopen. We premised our conversation on the input that were given by the public that time. And we had this representative of all stakeholders. We had parent associations represented, we had private schools represented, we had teachers represented, the unions were represented, the doctors were there, because this is a health matter. Everybody else in the sector was represented. And that is how the consultation was made wide and robust. Yeah. Okay.
So in this phase now, I'm saying if someone wants to contribute now into the reopening of schools now, how does he go about it?
That happened, Feisal,
it already happened.
It already happened, and we've already fine-tuned the the proposals and the, you know, the options that we are putting forward to the larger stakeholder, which is happening this Monday.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. So nothing else for those who are outside there and did not submit their proposals?
I'm sure your representative must have voiced your concern.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Mheshimiwa. Final word, your parting shot this evening. What's your parting shot this evening, Mheshimiwa?
I think if a decision will be made for us to reopen schools,
yeah,
let's not have this, you know, push and pull where some are questioning why, and some will be wondering, you know, whether it's an appropriate decision and all that. I think as a country, it's important if we move as a team in one direction. We decide to reopen, let's support our children to go back to school in whatever way possible. There's a lot that needs to be supported. Remember, these children, they were at home for almost 7 months. A lot must have happened in their lives. Most probably, some of them must have lost their parents to this COVID. Probably others must have, you know, their parents must have lost their income. There are others, like you've mentioned, who have, you know, encountered a situation where they ended up pregnant while still, you know, they are expected to return to school. So that means they will play double role. They will be a learner in a school. They will also be a mother to a child somewhere. So there are all these, you know, challenges that our children will be facing. So me and you, as parents, as teachers, you know, as community members, what is it that we should do to support them resume learning? Learning is not just taking back children to classroom. It's a lot more. It's more of a psychological thing that needs to be settled. So how are we working with them to settle them back to learning? That's the most important thing for me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much. Thanks so much to all our beloved viewers who have been part and parcel of this conversation. Thank you so much, Mheshimiwa Mumina Bonaya, for making time for us this evening. We will truly love to have you here once again to discuss matters education, of course. Thank you so much to my director and producer, Suleiman of Tumbo. Thank you so much to all the crew that made this show possible. And our final ticket to slumber this evening, it revolves around education. And we say, if you think education is expensive, then try ignorance. My name is Feisal Kassim, and thanks so much for keeping me company this whole hour of live Real Talk. See you next week, same place, same time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.